will, I'll ask for everybody's patience as we move ahead here. And as people, join, they can listen. And if they can't see the screen, we do have the handouts are available. I'm inclined to go ahead if that's okay with Nick and Bob.
Oh, it's fine with me.
And I think we'll need to mute the lines as we go forward for the presentation, I would suggest.
Okay, let me go ahead and mute everyone, then I will unmute whoever is on the panel. So here we go.
Mute off.
Nick, do you have the ball? Oh, the WebEx, the host does. Okay, Suzanne.
Correct.
Okay. And Bob, Suzanne's going to pass the ball to you after I get the first few slides going.
So, I
Mute on.
name in the list. Is he joined to someone else?
It could be one of the caller users.
Bob, can you still hear me?
And if not, we can advance the slides for Bob.
Can you hear me? I'm still here.
Okay, good.
Now we can
Do you
hear
see
you.
the slides?
I see everything now.
Okay, there
Okay,
you
his
are.
name just came up on the panelist. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So, Diane, go ahead and get started, and I'll advance the slides for you, and then I'll pass it over to Bob when he asks for it.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, welcome to everybody, and thanks again for your patience here. And we are recording this session now, so if something gets missed for you, you can go back and pick it back up again. So I'm ready now for the next slide, Suzanne. And the topic today, we're welcoming Robert Atkins to speak with us about how to maximize the scholar experience. And just a few reminders next, Suzanne, here about the participation. I think you know that the telephone line is muted. We'd love for you to raise your hand to respond or ask questions. And in this session, we're not going to do the polling questions, so you don't need to deal with that. But let's be sure that everybody has located the raise your hand sign. It's just right above the chat function there at the bottom of the participant list. There's a little hand raise icon there that you can use when you want to communicate with us. So, Suzanne, I'm ready for the next slide. And we should have one more. And now, Bob, I'm ready to introduce you. And I'm so glad that you're here with us. And everybody, I met Bob last year at one of the sessions at the foundation, and he did a presentation to the incoming scholars. And I really was hoping he would be available to do the same for you. It was just a wonderful session, and I'm glad that he's available. And Bob is an assistant professor at Rutgers, and some of you may know him. He was also a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Nurse Faculty Scholar. He's an author. He does research and service, and, a fabulous example of a nurse educator and faculty member. I put his link to his webpage at Rutgers, and I want you to particularly pay attention to it, because next week we're going to be talking about CVs and portfolios, and you can see a fabulous example of a career trajectory that Bob has established, and a way, kind of a way, an inspiration for you to see all the things that he's been able to accomplish in his short career already. So, Bob, I'm going to pass this now over to you, and we want to remind everybody that we're going to try to keep on schedule here, even though we're a little bit late in starting, because we need to start the next session after this one. So, Bob, take it away.
Oh, could you hear me before?
No, but I can hear you now.
Oh, so again, greetings. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and be invited to participate in this session. And I hope it is more of a participatory session where there's even though we are in the webosphere, hopefully we can still have a good interaction. I think that's what made last year's session so enjoyable for me and enjoyable for the students, hopefully, it was interactive. So hopefully we're going to find a way, Diane's going to help me, to make sure that we create a conversation. And what I'm going to present is just really just a starting point, and hopefully we'll be able to have over the next few minutes a conversation. But as I told Diane, I am willing, if you guys want to reach out, to get back to you after the session ends, in the next days or months. As things come up, feel free to still use me as a resource. As I show in this overview slide, I'm going to talk a little about my experiences, what got me into wanting to do research and wanting to be a faculty member and wanting to participate in academia. I'm also going to talk about graduate school, which I think weighs pretty heavily in your minds right now. And in talking about that, I'm going to talk about adopting the mindset of a scholar, making the most of your studies, planning your next steps. We'll have some discussion around that. And then the next piece, what I'd like to talk about is a little about making that transition from being a graduate student, where you're kind of a semi-insider, semi-outsider, to a faculty member, where you actually are a full-blown insider, and you see a different side of the institution, I think. And so I hope that's the interest. And also, hopefully we have some time for discussion, a case study, and some question and answer. But like I said, my whole hope is that we can make this a very kind of interactive kind of discussion. And I also should mention that I am just back from Washington, D.C. I was down for this Future of Nursing Summit, which was on Tuesday and Wednesday. And it was a very overwhelming in some ways, but very proud moment, I think, for nursing. And I think hopefully we can find a way to fit that into this discussion and talk about maybe some of the recommendations that the IOM and the RWJ came up with, and your feelings on these. I'd love to find a way we can work that in also, but we only have so much time. So Diane will help me, and we'll see if we can figure a way to do that. But I think there is a great deal to talk about, and I am, like I said, very excited to be able to participate in this conversation. Diane, anything you want to say at this point?
No, I think this is great, and again, you'll pause when you want to, have interaction and participation. And maybe one thing Suzanne can do for us is just open all the lines, or if we can see that somebody's raised their hand to participate, I will call on them. So I think we're off to a good start now. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Diane. So, as this slide shows, I never thought I was going to grow up to be a nurse. Nursing was, I was a second degree student into nursing, and when I was in nursing school, I was probably the last person you would ever guess would ever be working in a nursing school or school of nursing. But the reason I got into nursing was that I wanted to work with kids on a different level than a teacher would. I knew I wanted to do something with kids, and I knew I wanted to do something around health, and I wasn't sure what it is, and I kind of fell into this beautiful nursing vocation that I'm in, this career, this profession, and it was a great fit. I mean, so I wasn't, like I said, a superstar in nursing school, but if I had to do it again, and I didn't really, to be honest, I didn't really even like nursing school that much. I found it to be a little bit burdensome and different than my first degree, and it just pushed me in ways that I didn't like being pushed. But I made it through, and I swore I'd never go back, but here I am back. And the reason I got into nursing school is because I wanted to work with kids, and my first job out of nursing school was as a school nurse in the city of Camden. Camden is one of the poorest cities in our country. It's challenged in a lot of ways, but as a school nurse, I really got to understand Camden, and I really got to get a sense of these kids that are living there. I got a great sense of kind of some of the challenges that they face, but also some of their strengths. And then these kids were, in so many ways, like me as an adolescent and as a child. They have the same types of aspirations for healthy and constructive adulthood. Unfortunately, Camden is filled with many challenges that most of you probably are aware of, and the path these kids were on were not leading them to healthy and constructive adulthood. And I got really interested in trying to figure out, why are these kids going off the tracks? And so that's kind of what got me in. That's kind of why I think I am a nurse, what I'm trying to do in nursing. And that's kind of what I try to bring to the table, is just asking this question and trying to figure out what are we going to do about this. And what I think is so important, and why I think nursing is so important, is that what nursing has given me, in more ways than anything, is a way to look at this differently than I look at the problems of kids growing up in places like Camden differently, much more differently than a sociologist would, or somebody from public health, or a physician would, or a social worker would. I mean, I think what nursing does for us is it gives us a very unique and important lens to kind of look at what's going on. How can we improve the health and well-being of different populations? So I really try to push this agenda. I'll tell you right now, at the beginning of I know 60% of nurses work within the hospital, but there's 40% of us that work outside the hospital. And there's so much work to do outside the hospital, and I really try to push students, and I'll try to push you to think about it also, hopefully, to define the roles outside the hospital, what we can be doing in the community. So we're not just bedside. But anyway, so that's what I try to bring to the table. That's why I think it's important. That's why I think what you are all trying to do right now is so important. It's not just to, obviously, for your career, but take what you've seen. Take what you've seen at the bedside or in your community practice and make a difference in that. So obviously, one thing you want to figure out, what you're trying to figure out is not just how to get through nursing, your graduate nursing education, but what are you going to bring to the table? What are you going to do when you leave here? And at this Future of Nursing summit that they had earlier in the week, I heard a lot of nursing leaders. I mean, these are all the big needs. Everyone that you ever heard of in nursing was there, and they were all trying to figure out, how are we going to use nursing, not for the benefit of nursing, but to advance health. I mean, that's really that's something what I think sometimes gets lost. We talk about nursing. Some of us, I think, fall into this bad habit of talking about nursing as if nursing is something in and of itself. Nursing is only there to advance the health and improve the well-being of those in our society. That's what we do, and sometimes I think we can lose focus of that. But I thought that this summit was really good to kind of make sure we bring that to the fore and think about this is why we're doing it. I'm a nurse, not just because I like calling myself a nurse, but because I think what I can do as a nurse is so important. And so you all that are right there right now listening to this, you're going to be responsible for kind of taking these recommendations and shaping this and figuring out how we're going to implement this and how we're going to use nursing to advance health in this country. And then, like I say in this slide, I want to share a secret with you. I mean, I hopefully you all know, but you already are the leaders in nursing. We're not necessarily kind of just grooming you to be leaders in nursing. You are the leaders in nursing. And really all we're trying to do is give you better tools so that you can take what you already have and apply that to make the kind of difference that we need to have a better and healthier society. So part of that is adopting the mindset of a scholar. I mean, one of the recommendations that they talked about in the IOM, which it kind of bothered me a little bit because I thought it was a little bit patronizing, was it recommendation. I know you don't have them in front of you, but it's recommendation number 6 from this report from the Institute of Medicine. But ensure that nurses engage in lifelong learning. And that's part of being a professional. That's what you're supposed to do. And that to me seemed like, well, of course we're going to engage in lifelong learning. But it kind of bothered me that they would put that on there, like that we had to be, that we would have to be reminded to do that. But what I think is important, what I think we can draw from that is that it's important to have this mindset of a scholar. I mean, a scholar is a person that is engaged in lifelong learning. And whether you become a PhD prepared nurse or whether you work at a school of nursing or whether you work at the bedside or whether you work in the community, you still want to have the mindset of a scholar. And hopefully I'll talk about that some minutes, what that means. But Diane, do you have anything you want to say about that recommendation that I just talked about with the ensure that nurses engage in lifelong learning?
No, thank you for integrating that into your session. And, certainly it's an important one, but as you say, this is something we've been saying, and I think the scholars have already deduced that because they're on the career path of continuing their education. So for sure it's going to help all of us that we keep that prize in mind here, that we are always learning it. It's just going to be part of our lives.
Right. It's just part of our lives. We get up, and that's just kind of every day we're trying to figure out. We're trying to push ourselves, I think, to think about, what new things can we learn? And then in nursing, I think that's what we always have to do. I mean, healthcare is changing. And so we're always being pushed to learn something new. And you guys all know that. So anyway, that was a little bit troubling, but I think obviously we know that, so that's all right. This wasn't a perfect report, obviously, but I think it's up to us to kind of figure out what it means to us and how we implement this. Anyway, so Carol Dweck, she's a psychological researcher. She has this very interesting theory of intelligence and how people think about intelligence. It's very important how people think about intelligence because it influences, for you as a student, influences what you're doing right now within your studies and how you're reacting to your studies and what you're doing inside of that. So what Dweck says is there's basically these theories of intelligence, and there's two basic theories. There's entity theory of intelligence, which she refers to as a fixed mindset, or this incremental theory. And as you may guess, I mean, it's this growth mindset is kind of what we hope for. But the students that have this entity theory of intelligence are less likely to take these academic risks, which lead to academic competence. I mean, so this entity theory is kind of holds students back from getting the most out of their studies. In contrast, those that have that growth mindset, that incremental theory, are more likely to engage in a challenging task, which, while more risky, so you may kind of fall on your butt more, you have the potential to increase your academic competence and become this kind of lifelong learner that we all know that you need to be really the effective healthcare professional that you're going to be. So you have this entity theory, you have this incremental theory, and then obviously everybody doesn't have this incremental or growth theory. And so there are ways to kind of move from being in this kind of entity kind of class of understanding intelligence to being this more kind of incremental or this growth theory. So let's think about that. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's imagine you're in a program right now, and of course you are, but you're not getting the kind of grades that you hope. So what are you going to do? And adopting the mindset of a scholar, one thing you could do is think about, what are you trying to achieve? And think closely about that. So if you're trying to improve as a writer, or you're trying to get more comprehension of the material, or get a better understanding, or find a better way to convey your thoughts in the classroom, you think about that. That's what I'm trying to do. And so what's getting in the way of that? Is it because I have too many, and like spread too thin? I have too much going on at home or socially. That's kind of taking me away from getting at this goal. Am I not using my time wisely? Am I a person that, some of us do that, you keep the email open, even though everybody tells you should shut down the email and just focus on one task at a time. Multitasking is a bad idea. Or are you one of those people that, tries to answer every email when it comes in instead of kind of shutting that off? Are you someone that answers the phone instead of kind of blocking off that time and saying, no, I need to kind of figure out, this is my time, and right now I'm just going to write for the next hour, I'm going to read for the next hour, I'm not doing anything else? Are you the kind of person that kind of gets really anxious about assignments, and then because you're so anxious about it, you just don't get it started? I mean, that's kind of what's getting in your way. And so, another thing that, in terms of adopting the mindset of a scholar, you have to make a concrete plan. So you kind of figure out what's getting in your way, and you got to make a better plan of, how am I going to get from A to B? How am I going to get? And exactly, it has to be a concrete plan. Like, where do I want to get? How am I going to get there? What am I going to do? You got to put these details down. It's not just enough to say, oh, I want to become a DNP, or I want to get a PhD. It's not just enough to say that, but, how are you going to do it? I mean, you have to really kind of think about that. You have to make a commitment to thinking about that. Another important thing is that, as I said, a big part of being a incremental learner is taking risk. And then when you take risk, sometimes you're going to get knocked down. And it doesn't feel good to get knocked down. But if you're not getting knocked down some, then you're not really taking any risk. I mean, you're really kind of playing it safe. So you have to kind of put yourself out there. When you go out there, sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. And I've fallen down pretty hard sometimes, but you got to get back up. And when you get knocked down, it doesn't feel that great. It doesn't feel great to kind of give a talk that doesn't really fly the way you want it to go, or submit a paper and not get the kind of grade that you wanted. The feedback was like, oh, this is not kind of what you hope for. It doesn't feel good. But an important thing that Joy brings up is what you need to do is as you're feeling bad about kind of this outcome, you need to be doing something that's going to advance your kind of goals. And that's it may seem kind of course you do that, but sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes I think we just kind of focus on this bad feeling, what didn't work out, instead of saying, all right, I got to take some of that energy and channel that away from just kind of feeling bad for myself and think about how I can use this and kind of plan for the future. What I'm going to do. What am I going to do with this this paper that didn't work out that well? What am I going to do with, how am I going to improve my speaking, my talk, those kinds of things. Again, we have to challenge ourselves. Part of this growth mindset is, the more that you challenge yourself, the more that you push yourself, the more you're going to grow, the more you're going to get out of it. And she's looked at studies where she's actually given students different kinds of ways to look at the brain. And one student said brains that look, it's a fixed entity, and it doesn't change. And others that, kind of this idea that, hey, as we kind of push our brain is just another muscle. And the more we kind of push it, the more we're going to grow. And so one of the things that I think we have to remember is your goal as a student is not necessarily to show others how smart you are. I think sometimes, especially in, and I hate to say it, but it's probably true, but especially I think in nursing school, sometimes it becomes this kind of competition of what you get, what I get, you becomes less about kind of what you're learning, more about did you get the highest grade in the class. And it has to be more about, at this point in your career, I mean, you're poised to be the leaders of nursing. You have to think about what are you in graduate school for, and it's not to impress those to say that I'm smarter than 90% of my class. It's really to kind of get what you need, these tools that you're going to go out there and make a difference. So we have to kind of move past that. And I think sometimes you have to be reminded of that. Again, another part of us getting this mindset of a scholar, this kind of growth mindset, is finding ways to push ourselves every day and not run away from our weaknesses, and find ways to test ourselves and focus on our weaknesses rather than our strengths. And this is hard to do. It's hard to kind of put yourself in situations where you might not, which are not going to add to your ego and make you feel better necessarily. Sometimes it's actually going to make you feel worse. But I think the way to really grow is to kind of really find something that challenges you. And maybe you need to tell yourself, look, every week I'm going to do something that really kind of, or at least once a week I'm going to do something that really kind of pushes me and makes me kind of a little bit nervous. If you're not a little bit nervous, you're not a little bit anxious, then you're probably not pushing yourself. And that might mean that you'll accept an invitation to go speak in some sort of public forum, or maybe you'll be asked to be on a board and you have to kind of take that. And maybe you don't necessarily want to do that, or go to a conference or make a presentation. Just anything where you kind of, at least, once a week, where you're saying, all right, I push myself. And maybe it's little things, maybe it's big things, but just doing something where you say, okay, this is not a strength I have, and how am I going to push myself to get more out of myself? So I talked a little about this mindset of a scholar, and I think, obviously, you made this commitment to get yourself into graduate education, and you obviously set up as a goal you're going to get some sort of degree at the end of this. But I want to remind you is getting your Master's of Science, your DMP, or PhD. These are great achievements, all right, but they're not so much as goals. I really want to kind of look at this kind of idea of not looking at these kinds of achievements we have as initially kind of the end goal, but more as kind of like realize that when you get to this goal, you're just going to be opening another door. All right, so the door that you kind of open after you finished your bachelor's in nursing, it opened up these other opportunities, right? And you have to kind of look at it more like that. So just know that these are not just these degrees that you get. I mean, they're just opening doors. They're opening doors to more opportunities. And more opportunities for what? Opportunities for you to become the kind of nursing leader and change agent that makes a difference in our society, right? But that's really the end goal. That's the big goal, is to make a change in society. But you, as you kind of dance along in your career, in your trajectory, you're just opening these doors. And every time you open a door, you're being asked to do more, right? So as you get done your master's, and you're going to be opening doors to become a faculty member, you're being asked to do more. So it's kind of a mixed blessing to be achieving these kind of goals, but these goals are not the end goal. It's really just, you have to kind of keep in your mind, which is need to be doing more stuff. And that's great. Because there's going to be more positions. So there's always going to be more doors. For me, as a faculty member, for you, you go from being an untenured instructor on a non-tenured track or a clinical research track to being maybe on a tenure track. You get a PhD, right? So you have your DNP, your Master's of Science in Nursing, and now you get your PhD. So now you're on a tenure track. And so you have this big goal of, I want to get tenure, It's a nice achievement. I mean, hopefully, I'll be able to tell you, 6 months from now, my tenure packet was approved, and I'm a tenured professor now at Rutgers. But I'm not under any impression that once I'm tenured, that's it. I'm just going to be sitting in my office and play the banjo. There's just more doors that can open up. I'm just going to have to figure out what else I can be doing within our profession, within society, to kind of make a difference. Maybe I want to become a dean. Maybe I want to take a more of a kind of a leadership role in maybe some sort of organization or agency. But there's always these kinds of doors that you're going to be opening. And same thing with publications. Maybe you don't have a publication now. Maybe you do have a publication. Maybe you've been asked to be a co-author of a chapter. And maybe that's a great goal. Maybe you're thinking, it's great. Once I do that, I want to do that. And I used to kind of think that. I used to think, man, if I could get one thing published, then I'm done. I mean, that was kind of that goal-oriented way of thinking about what I was doing in terms of my role as a professional. But it's just once you get one, and you're like, well, there's going to be opportunities to do other things. You're just opening more doors, and other papers are going to kind of come up. And it's just, I'm sure Diane can tell you the same thing. It's just that, there's always something. There's always somebody asking you to do something else. There's always those opportunities. But as you go through these doors, there's just more doors that appear. So this door metaphor is kind of important for me to kind of, because sometimes I think you get bogged down and think, oh man, I'm just, it never ends. And it doesn't really end, right? And I think you have to kind of think about that way and not so much think about where you're trying to get to, but kind of, what you're doing along the way. And I hope that's a little bit clear. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit. Same thing with funding. It's just that, once you get, a little bit of intramural funding, funding from an institution, there's extramural funding, and they need to get bigger and bigger, but just along the doors, just a progression of just the things kind of progress and get increasingly bigger and bigger and more opportunities. Same thing in service. You start out, maybe you're mentoring students or advising students, or maybe you're mentoring your colleagues or your fellow students. But then, you start doing more service to your department or your college or your university or professional nursing. It just kind of grows. And so to think about that more about as a growth thing, not as like a fixed, and that's kind of also this kind of flex theory with like, I don't want you to look at what you're doing right now as kind of a fixed thing, like once you get this spot, that's where you stop. So it's just kind of this growth idea, like it's just, as you kind of push yourself, you can push yourself more and more doors open up. So making those two studies. One of the things that I think when I look back on my career as a student, one of the things that I didn't make the most of, and what I should have done, was got more opportunities to get feedback and criticism on my writing. I mean, I think we all can write, right? We can all put words on the page, but that's obviously, you want to be able more than just put words on the page. You want to be able to convey your thoughts and your ideas in a very persuasive way. And the way that you're able to do that, the way that you get good at that is by getting feedback and getting criticism and writing a lot and asking people and putting yourself in positions where you're going to get feedback and criticism and understanding what didn't work or what does work. And that is not something that always happens. It definitely doesn't happen in undergraduate for the most part, because I think that as many of you know, that you can submit most of your stuff is hardly, you can get an A for something that is really not that great. And a lot of it, if you just kind of follow the guidelines and just don't have a bunch of proofreading errors in there, then your instructor, the faculty member that reads the paper will basically give you an A. It gets a little more difficult in graduate school, and the same thing as you move into PhD training. And the same thing as you move into the world of scholarly writing, where reviewers are very critical about how you express your thoughts and how you think. And so the important thing to remember about writing, and writing is so important for us as nurses, is it's not a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of hard work. And I think that was one of the best pieces of advice that I got from one of my mentors was, I was getting frustrated. He was really pushing me to become a better writer, and I was getting pretty frustrated because it wasn't really making me feel great to feel like I wasn't writing that well. And I thought, what am I, dumb? But again, he said, no, there's nothing to do with intelligence. Writing is just a sign of hard work. And just like I wouldn't expect anyone that's never sat in front of a piano just to sit down in front of a piano and be able to play the piano, you can't do that with writing. You have to work at it. It really is just a matter of how hard you're willing to work at it. And I think the great thing about writing, and keep coming back to that, is that sometimes I think a beauty of writing is that it gives you an opportunity to really see how you think. I mean, you may think you understand something, but when you have to write it down and put it on a page, it really kind of clarifies your thinking. So that's one reason. Another reason is to really work with writing, because I think it really does help you to kind of solidify and get a good sense of what you're thinking and how you're thinking and whether how you're thinking is logical. And when you see it on page, sometimes you can see the holes in it. And so another thing that you need to be doing to make the most of your studies right now is find opportunities to serve as a reviewer. Whether you're reviewing for a journal, whether you're reviewing for a funding agency, or whether you're reviewing for some sort of internal thing maybe within your college or school of nursing right now. But you have some expertise, and when you're serving as a reviewer, when you're asked to kind of look at something and read it, you're able to share that expertise. And all of you know more than somebody else about some topic. I mean, you're expert in something. I can guarantee you, there's something that you know. There's some perspective you have as a nurse or as a clinical specialist in something that somebody else doesn't really know. And you need to be able to share that expertise. I mean, it helps others, and you need to start getting in the habit of figuring out how you're going to share expertise and what you're going to bring to the table. Another thing, of course, is now's the time to start seeking out mentors, seeking out people that are going to be able to look at what you're doing and look at the path you're on and give you insights and give you kind of guidance as to ways that you can kind of optimize what you're doing and kind of focus your resources. Because I think one of the things that is a big danger is that when you're opening all these doors, you can get really scattered. You can get spread very thin. And sometimes a mentor is a great person to kind of say, you know what, you have to let that go, and you have to focus on this. Because you're trying to get from here to here, and so you have to really sometimes just kind of, when you're doing that, you have to kind of pick, where you're going to focus your resources. And you're going to find, as you move more and more into opening more and more of these doors, that you can get really stretched. And you end up trying to do way more than you can do well. It's better to do a few things well, I think, than trying to do everything and just doing it in a very kind of haphazard or weak way. So, so like I said, find mentors, find out people that can help guide you and give you feedback. And also, start finding mentees. See people that are maybe on your hospital floor or somebody that's in a position that maybe hasn't reached your status yet. And find out ways to help them. Find ways to kind of give back. It's not too early. I mean, you're already, like I said, a leader. And that's part of what I think good leaders do, is find ways to kind of pass it on and bring other people along and bring them with you and kind of, make sure they don't make the same mistakes that you made. Another way to make the most of your studies right now is not to get drawn into the dramas that occur maybe within your program, the dramas that are occurring right now, probably on the places that you may work right now. You have to kind of stay somewhat out of that whole mix and just kind of keep your head down and try to figure out how you're going to focus your energy on getting from where you are to where you kind of want to be, so you can kind of open more of those doors. Because we really do, we need you. We need you out here. I mean, we one of the recommendations that the IOM came up with in this report is they want to double the number of nurses and doctors by 2020. They want to double, and I'll send you a link after this is all over that has these reports, and I really encourage you all to look at these report recommendations, but and focus on kind of what these recommendations are. But I mean, one of them, as I said, is recommendation number 5 to double the number of nurses to doctors by 2020, and that speaks to the great need we have. If we're going to prepare more nurses, if we're going to prepare nurses to work in the kind of settings that we need them to work to have enough of them, to have them to be prepared confidently enough to provide the kind of care that we know is so important for the health of our country. We need more nurses with doctors. And this doesn't mean that all nurses with doctors are going to work in academic settings. A lot of them are, but some of them just probably need more preparation. And so as DNPs or PhDs, what was really kind of interesting to me was that this recommendation did not just double the number of nurses with a PhD by 2020 or double the nurses with a DNP by 2020. Or even double the number of nurses with a PhD in nursing by 2020. Just to double the number of nurses with doctors. And that suggests to me that they want to keep it broad. And what they seem to be indicating in this recommendation is that there's so much knowledge out there and there's so much ways that we can kind of move the science by having more nurses with doctorates. We're really talking about moving the science forward. And when we move the science forward in nursing and in healthcare, we're improving the health of those in our society. That's going to be the end goal, protecting the health of those in our society. Diane, anything you want to say about that?
No, that's great. I'm enjoying this. I'm kind of reflecting here. Angela McBride talked to us about our careers in the various stages of the career, and what you're saying really hits home to all of us, no matter what stage we are in our careers. So I think the scholars will find it interesting, as well as the faculty and mentors who are on here. I think this is a universal career trajectory here, and thanks again for bringing in the recommendations from the summit.
Yeah, and so these guys had the opportunity to hear from Angela? Angela spoke to them?
Yes, I did. She was the keynote at the opening session. And
what a treat. I mean, Angela seems a great mentor to me, and actually I saw her last week, yesterday in D.C. I just left her, and she is just, I think, one of those great mentors, and one of those people that has opened so many doors and has pushed so many people into opening other doors, and it's just kind of funny how many connections she has to people who are in leadership positions. I think it's great that you guys are going to hear from her, because I think she's one of those really, really special leaders that does it quietly and does it really well, and just has great insights and willing to share them and really kind of help others. And so I think I'm really glad to hear you guys heard from Angela back.
Well, and this is just linking right into what she was saying. All these tips you're giving us here about how to make the most of our studies, and make the most of our career, and make most of the scholar experience. This just all fits. So this is great.
Well, she epitomizes making the most of me. She really does.
Well, she was my mentor too, so.
Many mentors. I met so many people said, Angela's connected to so many leaders and so many people that I respect, and that everybody seems to have a connection to Angela. It's just kind of amazing that she's had such an impact within nursing and health. It's just,
and I think from the scholars' perspective and from the faculty members who are attending today too, her career is, exactly the goal that we all aspire to. So, great.
And she has a great balance. I mean, she has a great personality, and she just has she has a great energy, and I think that's also what we kind of aspire to and that's something that is a gift. I mean, to be able to kind of keep that balance and have that kind of, she has a sense of humor, she has a sense of, and she connects with people, and I just think that's another thing that I think you want to kind of preserve, is that's also, it's opening these doors to not kind of forget to kind of reach back and pull people along with you, to be able to kind of be generous and generous in spirit, and I think that's another great strength of hers. She's such a generous also.
And of yours. I can see that for you too. You're doing a great job of inspiring the next generation here.
Hope so. And so this is obviously, you may have a future in academics, and some of you may decide to stay in clinical practice or go in other directions, and policy directions maybe. But it's not too early. If you're thinking about it, it's even kind of an inkling in the back of your head to think about, someday I want to be a doctor's affairs faculty member it's not too early to think about that. And one thing I kind of pulled out of this presentation, and I talked about last year, slide I pulled out was, if the dissertation is something that you think is you would do, you get a PhD in nursing and go into academics, but if not for the dissertation, I'm here to tell you that the dissertation it's just a big book report. It's really all your goal in writing a dissertation is just to make a substantial and original contribution to the science. That's it. And it's very formulaic, and it should not at all kind of stand in the way of any of you if you're interested in. If somehow in the back, and I know for me when I was a graduate student thinking, I could never write a dissertation, and it's a crazy thing to kind of stop you because a dissertation is just it's really just a bunch of big mid-sized papers. I mean, the papers that you write now, but it's just there's a formula to it, and it really should not at all kind of hit you. And like I kind of said last year, it's a dissertation. It's not a you're not writing your life story. You're not writing the book that changes everything. You're writing a paper that kind of explains a really small piece of something out there, some phenomenon. And so just keep that in the back of your head. We can talk about that. You should feel free to send me emails after this. You have my email address. But if you ever want to have a conversation about doctoral studies, I'd love to talk to you about it. I'd love to kind of give you some guidance on that. And so I'm not going to focus too much on that because we won't have that much time. I don't want to hear from you. But it's not sure to start thinking about a career in academia, thinking about things that you want to write, classes you want to teach. But it is a good way to think about that, to start to put these ideas down, to start writing down some of the things you want to do. Like I said, you got to make it concrete. One thing you should always do, of course, in planning your next step as you move from being in this kind of semi-outsider role as a graduate student and think about what you're going to be doing next is be careful in how you weigh what others are telling you about what you should be doing with your time and where you should go next. Just be able to be careful that you have to weigh it. I mean, nobody's, except for maybe Angel Van McBride, but nobody's advice should totally guide you. You have to weigh it. You have to kind of figure out, talk to a lot of people. Find as many people as you can and kind of figure out and get a sense of maybe where you should be going. Because I remember, as probably many of you remember, there's people that told you when you graduate from your undergraduate program, you have to go and work a year in med-surg, you have to do this. And I think kind of one of the things that made my career so satisfying and what I love about nursing is there's nothing you really have to do. If you can prepare yourself. I left nursing school and I was lucky enough to get a job as a school nurse. That was my first job out of nursing school. And I was able to make the case that I would be able to be competent and be able to take care of the kids and make sure nothing happened, and I was. And you guys can do that also. So don't feel like you're locked into you have to do this, you have to do that. I think you have to be very careful in how you think about what those are telling you when others are telling you what you have to do. But what I will also want to make clear, like I said earlier, is when you take risks, when you're pushing the envelope a little bit, you're going to get banged up, and you're going to sometimes feel like an imposter. If you don't already feel like if you haven't felt like an imposter yet, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Everyone has to be at some point where you feel like you're faking it, where you feel like you don't belong. When you feel like this kind of person, like, oh man, everyone's going to know that I don't know enough to be here, or I don't know what I'm doing. And I think that's kind of, that's a normal part of your development as a professional, a normal part of your development within, with nursing is feeling like an imposter. And so, I still sometimes feel like an imposter. But I think as you get those feelings, you have to kind of make sure you also find allies. And those people who are going to help to re-energize you and going to ask you the hard questions and going to be able to kind of help pick you up when you're feeling kind of down and feeling questioning yourself and trying to figure out what the next doors are to open. You want to have start collecting people, start finding people that you want to keep in contact with and There may be classmates of yours. There may be people that are in this program with you. There may be people that there may be faculty members you're meeting along the way. And those are great people to start to kind of to build a network of people that are going to kind of kind of remind you of, like, this is what you said you're going to do. I mean, and you need those people around you. You need those people that kind of remind you of what you said you're going to do, and kind of, and also kind of help energize you. And I think your fellow scholars in this program are great. I mean, for me, one I think of the great things of the Nurse Faculty Scholars Program that I'm a part of is that I have 14 other scholar colleagues who are just all in the same position and all kind of facing the same kinds of issues, and it's great to kind of bounce ideas off them and get feedback from them and kind of laugh with them. If I get to laugh with them, I mean, you got to be anxious every day, but also laughing every day. I mean, you have to kind of push yourself, but also find a way to kind of laugh and unwind, and then having that kind of balance so that you enjoy opening these doors and you kind of understand that it isn't so much about kind of just getting from A to B, but it's also kind of what happens along the way. So I've talked a lot. I'm sick of hearing myself talk, but I'd love to get some of the ideas, some of the challenges and concerns that you've had so far as a graduate student, and maybe and Diane's going to help me field some of these questions, but I'd love to get.
And I'm going to call on Bob. Thanks. I'm going to call on Suzanne here to be at the ready. I think I'm going to remind everybody first how to raise your hand so we can try to get a name and call on you by name. Otherwise, we're probably just going to have to open the lines up and have people participate. But first, I want you to take a look in that little box on the far right-hand side where it says participants. And down at the very bottom, underneath the mute button, there is a hand sign that you can raise your hand. You just click on it, and that will let us know that you have a question or a comment here to raise to the floor for us. So I'm looking here. I see something from Laura. And Suzanne, can we call on the students one at a time, or can you open the line so Laura can speak?
We can call on them one at a time, or I can open all the lines at once, whatever you would like.
Well, I think it's probably the easiest just to call on them one at a time. And do you see Laura Zareski's name there?
I do. Laura?
Okay. Go ahead, Laura. Your line is open to talk to us.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Laura.
I was just, I had a question, the challenges and concerns or for myself, just in terms of time management with when you're trying to learn and read all the required reading and as well as research. How do you, just for me, it's just been time management for these courses.
Yeah, that's a great question, Laura. And I think I'd like to make a really important plug for focusing how you're going to, because sometimes it seems like the reading, you have to read 24 hours a day to get all the reading done. I'm sure it feels like that sometimes. And that probably isn't the case. You have to read 24 hours a day, but you have to read a lot. And I think one of the things you have to remember is that you have to, as an active learner, as a person you're in graduate school right now because you're trying to do something else. And your goal isn't just to get to graduate school. Your goal is to do whatever you're trying to do. But I think when you're reading and think about what you're going to read and how you're going to read it, you have to go in there with a goal of I'm going to read. I'm trying to get this information out of here. And so kind of really goal-directed ideas in terms of what you want to get from every reading you're going to do. And then you're kind of searching for that when you're doing the reading. So maybe you're not going to read the whole chapter. Maybe you're going to only read, maybe there's only a few pieces in that chapter. Maybe there's only 10 pages of the 40 pages that you really need to focus in on. But those 10 pages are so important to you. If you'll focus on those and really kind of get into that. So I think you have to be a little more, I think you have to be selective in terms of how you approach all the reading, and to think about how the reading you're trying to do is really going to contribute to your practice and where you're trying to go. Because sometimes it is overwhelming, and I know it can feel like I can never get this all done, and then you're always in this kind of state of kind of where you can never kind of settle down and actually kind of get something out of it because you're always thinking, well, I have to kind of go to the next thing. And I think it's really important to read with the focus. Does that help at all, Laura?
Yes, it does, because I find myself not only just doing the reading, but going on to other, to research things within the reading, and I'm wondering if that's just wasting my time. I mean, I'm trying to expand what I'm reading, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I think sometimes it's probably more important for you to kind of expand in one area than try to get it all done. I mean, so like, let's say you stepped on something that you say, oh man, I really kind of, I really want to understand this better. And as for me, if I was your faculty member, I'd much rather hear that, oh, you know what, Laura, you didn't get to read this other pieces, but you really kind of focused in and really drilled down hard on this material, and you really understand this, and this is going to kind of stick with you. And I'd be much happier kind of knowing that you kind of focus for yourself to figure out what you need to get out of it, rather than just kind of going by my syllabus and doing every piece of reading that I have. Because, you know, I think faculty members really do want you to take an active role in figuring out what's important to you, and they do want you to drill down on material that you know to be important, you're really interested in.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Okay. Great, and I see that Shelby Pitts has a comment.
Hello, Shelby.
Hello, Dr. X.
Oh, so formal, Shelby. That was a bomb, Shelby. Come on. How you doing, Shelby?
I'm fine, and you?
Good. It's nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, you too. I'm so glad that you raised the point about writing. And that's one of the things that I have a particular interest in, especially, you know, both through the scholar program and then also just in grad school in trying to, you know, better my writing. So what would you suggest would be a good way to start if we've never, you know, like written for a scholarly journal or anything like that?
You know, I think one good way to start is to think about, to look at some of the journals out there and figure out, you know what, my goal for this semester is to take one of these papers that I've written and figure out how to polish this up for publication. And there are so many journals out there. There's so many journals out there, and right, there's obviously some journals that are not going to really be open to taking student writing, but there's journals out there that would love to get some of your ideas, and there's things that I know you to be expert in, Shelby. There's things that you could say, maybe be a review of the literature, or maybe something that you've done, and usually that's a starting point. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're just basically going to change the format and be able to submit it. It's going to be a process, and it's not necessarily that the first journal you submit to is actually going to take it, but you're going to get feedback. As long as it goes in the review, that peer review process, you're going to get feedback and you're going to get insight. And this is also a point where you could find like a faculty mentor, somebody that you know have a long-standing relationship with, and say, hey, you know, would you mind taking a look at this, and give me some feedback as to, you know, what I could do with this and where I could go with this, because I think that's an important part of getting stuff into the pipeline and figuring out, going through that process of getting that paper from this one point into kind of moving to this kind of scholarly direction, and you know, that's just changes to language and how you kind of approach things and how you set things up. But it's just a formula, and I think that's important to kind of figure out what that formula is, and this is a great time to kind of do that. And you probably have something that you've written, that you've worked on, that with some work you could actually kind of shape up and figure out how to get it published somewhere. Does that help?
Okay. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, Bob, looks like we've answered the comments for people who have their hands raised.
All right.
We'll give one more opportunity. Somebody wants to raise their hand for a quick question. Otherwise, you want to move ahead then?
Yeah. Let's
okay, but we have some great questions there. Thank you.
Somebody put a chat. That was it.
What are you
I
looking at?
careful laryngitis while you utilize his chat function. Just want to say I appreciate your approach to the daunting idea of publishing by breaking it down into baby steps. if you will. I have this fear of what on earth could I possibly have to offer that hasn't been done. Now, oh, good. Oh, I'm glad, Nancy. I'm sorry to hear laryngitis, but I'm glad to hear that that you're thinking about, breaking down the baby steps is so important. You know, I mean, a colleague of ours, Bernadette Melnick, said, you know, how do you eat a life-size chocolate elephant? And I think something like, you know, one bite at a time. You know, and you have to kind of, it just seems so much, but if you kind of can break it down, it's so important to kind of break it down and think about, you know, how can I just do a little piece today? And sometimes you sit down and you just like say, I'm just going to work on this for 1 hour. And you work from where you know. I mean, in all your writing, start from what you know best and work out. Don't try to start with the introduction. Don't try to start with whatever you know, whatever you feel strongest about. That's where you start, and you kind of work out from there. But yeah, breaking down into baby steps is so important, and it's such a I'm glad you brought that up. But and I hope your laryngitis gets better soon. So adjusting to the faculty role. You know, as you go from being a graduate student to faculty, there's obviously and before you know it, you'll be in that position. There's obviously new expectations. You know, instruction or education, the research, clinical scholarship, the advisement, and the service. Those are kind of how it breaks down usually for most people. And as this person Dinham mentioned, graduate school provides teaching opportunities and research experience. But useful as they may be for preparing us for faculty life, these are foremost the experiences of graduate education, not the experiences of faculty status. And that's so true. I mean, faculty status is a whole different set of expectations. As a graduate student, you have kind of a window into what's going on there inside this kind of institution, inside this organization, but you don't have complete access. You're still kind of an outsider, and so it's still a little bit census for you in terms of what you're going to see. But as you move to this kind of faculty role where you're an insider, you're a full-fledged insider, there are really two basic questions that you'll need to answer. And one of those questions is, how are things done here? And so you may or may not have a great sense of that as an outsider. And they're all done at different institutions. You know, I'm sure Indiana and Rutgers do things very differently. And so, but you want to know how things are done, no matter where you're going. I mean, as you kind of figure out where your next steps are, if you're going to be going into an academic setting, as I assume most of you will at some point, because we are in dire need of clinical experts, you know, working with our students. You know, you do want to know how things are done at the institution you're going to, and also what's important, what's really important here. And Peter Selden gives us 10 kind of characteristics of academic culture to give us a sense of, you know, what's important here, how are things done here. You know, things you have to ask, these questions you have to ask as you kind of move forward, decide where you want to be, kind of what the best fit is for you. Because you want to be selective in where you kind of go. You don't want to just go to the first place that invites you, because you know, it may not be a great fit for you. You know, one of the questions that Selden brings up is this individual autonomy. You know, what's the degree of freedom here? You know, is it really important that you get the job done, or is it important that you do it a certain way? And so, who's going to, is this very kind of top-down process where you have a chair or a dean that says, this is exactly how I want you to do it, and you'll do it this way, and that's what I do it. It's just more kind of, you know, here's your freedom, and you can kind of have, as long as you get, you know, students from here to here, that's what I care about. So this individual autonomy is one of the things you want to think about when you're thinking about working in some sort of academic institution. The structure is also important. The extent to which the institutional rules impact upon what faculty members are doing. You know, is it a place that is really open to faculty kind of being innovative and taking on new challenges and doing things in new types of ways? Or is it a place that kind of is like I said, very kind of top-down, very tightly controlled, where things flow from the top and kind of trickle down and they tell you where to go, as opposed to being a place where the structure is looser and maybe kind of more less hierarchical, more kind of horizontal, where, hey, we're all in this together and let's figure out how we can kind of approach this problem. Another thing you want to know, of course, what are the types of resources that are available to support the faculty? I mean, do they have an office of research? Do they have a center or institution within that university or college that supports teaching. I mean, so a place where you can actually go and kind of work on different aspects of your teaching where you're going to get feedback, or a place where you can kind of go and take your research idea and kind of get mentoring on how you take that from an idea to making a funding proposal. And so the support's a really important to think about. The identity, the sense that the faculty and staff and students all feel that this is something that they're proud of, that they really connect with, that the institution reflects them, and they have a loyalty towards this place and feel like that it's something that they're proud of. I mean, it's really kind of a place where people are just like, well, it's like any other place. It's not connected to me. I'm not connected to it. I could go anywhere else and do this, but it's a place that people feel strongly about. The quality of the personnel. One of the books that I just read was this book called Good to Great by this guy Collins, and it's a book really kind of aimed at business practices, and what Collins does in this book is talks about companies that were really good, and they were able to adopt some innovation or do something to become a great company. And he kind of bases becoming a great company by looking at how they compared to companies that were just like them at one point in time, but these companies were able to achieve much greater growth in terms of economically, and in terms of how much they grew economically. So that's basically the outcome. But one of the important things that Collins talks about is in thinking about, it's not so much a matter of personnel, it's a matter of having the right personnel. And getting, as he says in his book, it's kind of getting the right people on the bus, getting the right people there with you. And you can figure out, you can handle almost any problem, but you have to have the right people on board. And so, I think when you look at an institution, you have to think about, do they have the right people? Do they have the people that have, people that are problem solvers, people that are what we call meta leaders, people that are kind of aren't looking for somebody to kind of necessarily always tell them exactly what to do, but they get a sense of, what's the bigger mission here and how do I fit into this? I mean, those are the right people. Those are the kind of people that you want to be. You don't want to be that kind of faculty member that has to have somebody dictate to you every moment, this is what you have to do next. You want to be a person that's kind of driven to be excellent, and obviously you are already. I mean, you already are. You're part of this program. RWJ are obviously things that you do have. You have shown excellence. You are our leader. But you want to be like that. You want to be in a place where you're surrounded by people like that. You want to be, because that it can really wear you down to be in a place where you have people that are just kind of doing their 8 hours and getting out of there, doing just enough to get by. And there's nothing valuable or inspiring or encouraging about being that kind of environment. So you really want to look at that place and think about, ask yourself this question, are the right people on the bus? In terms of being the right people on the bus, you really want to look at the people that you're working with and how much they work together, how much that they are kind of all pulling in the same direction. Because you don't really want to, and I'm sure you know from being on the floor of a hospital, that's where you've worked, but some cultures and some units work really well together. I mean, that if things get really kind of acute with one patient, somebody picks up the slack. And you want to be in a place where people pick up the slack for each other, where they kind of cooperate, and people are kind of, everybody's pulling in the same direction, and you know that I've got your back, and you've got my back, and we're going to make sure that, no matter what happens, we're going to get through this. So you want to be in a place like that. And academic institutions, some are more like that than others. I think you really want to ask that question, do people cooperate around here? Are people really working together? Do they kind of have a shared sense of, we're all in this together? In terms of decision making, are they looking to have consensus? Are they looking to, is it autocratic? Is it, what's the faculty's role in kind of thinking about, the curriculum that they're going to adopt, or the grading policy, or whether they're going to do clinical, all these kinds of things. But how are decisions made? What are faculty meetings like? And I know for most of you, as graduate students, you probably haven't been in a faculty meeting, but they can really range in what they're like. I mean, some faculty, like, there's just a couple key people that are speaking, and some that, the most junior to the most senior, the newest person to the person there the longest, all have a voice. And so, you really want to think about, what voice would you have if you came to this institution and trying to move the institution forward, right? I mean, what would your role be? So that's another question to think about. Obviously, when we've talked to this theme that's going to come up throughout this talk is about this risk tolerance and taking risk. And to kind of to see change, to see difference, you have to really be willing to take risk and kind of push things. And sometimes, like we said, innovation and risk taking doesn't come without cost. Sometimes you're going to, you're going to get knocked down, fall on your butt. But are you a place that kind of says, oh, that's all right? We know that sometimes this is going to happen. Is that a place that says, oh, you screwed up? So what's the risk tolerance? And the communication. How is information shared? I mean, if something happens of consequence within this institution, is it likely that it's just going to be kind of spread through word of mouth or rumors, or is the chair or the leader of the institution going to come down and say, hey, this is what happened, here's the details, I'm being very transparent, I want everyone to know what's happened, and kind of this is kind of how we're trying to address this, or is it something that, you just kind of have to kind of be surprised when you found out and hear from somebody else that, oh, did you hear this happened here? But this is really important, how communication is shared, and how these kind of the networks that develop within an institution, and how information is passed around. And you want to be in a place, obviously, that information is kind of flows in a where there aren't any secrets, where you kind of don't know what's going on. You feel much more comfortable, you kind of know what's going on. So, and obviously this sense in which you're in a community, where you have a group around you, and you feel a connection to them. You have this kind of social trust, and there's a lot of social capital, and you feel like somebody's got your back, and you're not going to be left hanging out in the cold. I mean, you want to be in a place where there is a community, and you like. Not that people have to be your best friends, but you spend a lot of time at work, and it's nice to be in a place where you like the people you're around. Do the people that at an institution, do they have lunch together? Do they celebrate special events? Or sad events, happy events, birthdays, funerals. Do they know what's going on in their kids' lives? I mean, it's not that. It's not that, like I said, you have to be the best friends. You have to become your best friends, but you probably want to be in a place where there is a sense of community. People do feel a connection to each other and kind of want to know what's going on with each other. So that brings me to, we have some time, and I'd like to look at this case real quickly, hopefully, and get an opportunity for you to kind of give some feedback on it. But we'll call it the junior faculty member, and I'll read it. You can read along. You're the medical surgical clinical instructor for BSN students. There have been a few instances during pre- and post-conferences that the students seem unaware of some basic concepts. However, overall, the students in your clinical group are well prepared and hardworking. A few students have complained to you privately about the tenured professor who is responsible for the theory portion of the class. They complain that this professor is disorganized and paces her classes poorly. For example, she'll spend an hour on one slide and not cover other slides. Moreover, they report that this professor has questions on the exam that are not covered in class. So, based on kind of what I've discussed in the past couple minutes, what are some of the academic culture issues that you want to consider in choosing a course of action? And you could, I don't know how we want to handle this, Diane, but they could either type this response, or they could raise their hand and kind of weigh in on that.
Probably the easiest thing to do is for them to raise their hand. And if you have your hand raised, Shelby and I think it was Laura, put your hand down so we don't call on you a second time. But we'd love to hear from others. We'll go first here with taking the people with their hands raised, and then we'll move on to anybody who wants to type into the chat. So, I don't know if this is Laura with her hand raised again, or Laura. you want to make a comment?
Sorry, I just don't know how to put the hand down.
Okay, you click again on your hand icon, and that'll put it down. Okay, so we'll open up here now for some responses and some ideas, and you might, if you have your notes in front of you, you could kind of look back and see these 10 points of academic culture and see how they would relate to handling this situation. And so we'll see if anybody wants to make a comment. Okay, I think somebody has, Bob, if you can read down there in the chat line there at the bottom, I think somebody typed in an answer. Do you see that?
Okay. Perhaps try to work with the other professors. Maybe some content could be covered in preclinical or postclinical, not covered in didactic class. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, that's a great approach. I mean, I think that one of the issues that I think for clinical instructors is that sometimes the way it breaks down is that the clinical instructor is kind of the clinical person, and the theory instructor tends to be this PhD prepared person who may be a little bit more kind of the clinical realm, maybe not. But I think there's a hesitation to get involved and to raise any issue. Sometimes I think there's the risk that you run playing it too safe and sitting on your hands and not kind of getting engaged with that. I think probably a great step is to probably try to start working with that other professor and maybe think about seeing, you know, is there some way that you can kind of team with this person in kind of covering some content, or you know, maybe kind of even mention, you know, the students seem a little weak in this, but open up some sort of communication there. I think that's really important in terms of problem solving, but open some communication, like, you know, this I see this as kind of a weakness or kind of, but I think you probably want to start opening up the communication as early as possible, but yeah, but identifying that this is a weakness maybe with the students and trying to see if you can get a dialogue going. And I guess what I think is really important is that if you're not really satisfied with that kind of approach, you have to find one that in some way, before it's too late, that actually benefits the students, where the students do get, I mean, they need to get this material, they need to get it, but you might have to go a step further. Maybe you have to talk to the clinical director. Maybe you're going to have to, you know, talk to the chair. But I think what I think is dangerous is or it does a disservice to the students, and it's probably a bad habit to be into anyway. It's just to kind of sit on your hands and not take any kind of role in trying to address it. And I think sometimes, especially as a junior faculty member, you can kind of get in that feeling where you know, you don't really want to get involved, and I think we need to be involved. I mean, like I said, we're not in nursing just to kind of improve nursing. We're in just because we're in advanced health, and these students are going to be the future nurses out there. We really have an important role, and it starts as soon as you get there and trying to, and it might get a little bit messy, and so I just kind of, and as I put this case in there, it's really kind of push this idea that, you know, we do have to find ways to make sure that we're taking responsibility.
We have about 8 minutes left, and I'm going to suggest that the scholars can go back and kind of look at those 10 points that you gave about the culture of the institution, and maybe in a discussion with their mentors or their colleagues, they could, you know, consider a few more of these issues. But I think you got the main point there, and that was great.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Right, and I think that students' concerns should be addressed in a polite manner as well. As you said before, it should not be gossip-driven. Should be addressed directly, and I think that's true. I think you got to kind of get it out there and approach it without this feeling that, hey, I don't want to upset the apple cart, but it's okay. But as long as you're kind of being open and being very forthright, I think that's the most important thing. The article I gave you also kind of gave some ideas in terms of moving from this kind of graduate student role into this kind of faculty role. And when I read the article, one thing I thought about was, if you want to, this quote, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think it's so important that for you right now, at your point, you start finding you have a cohort right now that you're engaged with, but find allies and find those people that will help you go far, because that's what you want to do. I mean, and I think you can do a lot on your own. You can do it. You can be very nimble and quick and responsive, but you really want to you really want to kind of last and go far, because you really have to start developing a network of people that are going to help you, whether it be in terms of working on papers, working on funding proposals, brainstorming ways to improve the curriculum, but find people that you can kind of work with as much as possible, because it may take a little bit longer, but it's going to be worth it in the long run. So, in response to that article, we have a couple more minutes, are there any kind of challenges or concerns that you have as a grad student that maybe came up, that maybe you'd like to discuss, kind of throw out there?
We'll take maybe one or two comments or questions, Bob, and then we'll just kind of move along, because we want to be sure that we're wrapping up here.
Yep.
Sorry, I hate this rule of being...
Oh, no, I hate that rule too, but...
Yeah, but we want to be sure that all, the scholars have their questions answered and comments made, and again, some of the scholar groups, meet and have further discussion, so I think if they wanted to use this article and, as a basis for discussion, that would be great.
Oh, that would be great. I mean, this has been a great opportunity for me. I wish, as I said, it's kind of hard, I think, when we don't have eye contact, but this was, I hope it was valuable to the scholars to have this kind of the talk that I gave. I enjoyed giving it, and if there's any kind of questions I said that occur to you down the road, feel free. I will make sure that you have my contact information. You have my phone number and email. It's probably just that you can contact with me. But feel free to kind of reach out as things kind of occur as you move along.
Okay, and Bob, while you are in the driver's seat, could you advance some of the next slides here? And I'm going to, you have the optional case study. If we have just 1 sec, you guys think about any other questions while I do my wrap-up stuff, and we'll come back for questions with Bob. And how about giving me the next one?
Oh, next one?
Next slide, yeah. I want to remind the scholars that we have sessions coming up. Those are the sessions, and your post-session follow-up is to go into the discussion forum in the collaborative learning community in WebEx and introduce yourselves. I want to be sure that you guys know how to get into that area, and that you will, can post and understand how to move in that area. And then, Bob, let's go to this very last slide, because I want to be sure that we have time to thank you for sharing your wealth of information. And I also want to particularly thank Nick Pelzer. He has been the guiding light behind all of the collaborative learning community. It's been his vision that we should, have these seminars, that we should use the technology, and that we should, reinforce and tie together and make all these links for the community and to help prepare scholars and faculty members for New Jersey. So, Nick, my heartfelt thanks. I've enjoyed working with you, and I think on behalf of all of us who have been part of these collaborative learning communities, we want to particularly thank you for making this possible for us.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
And Bob, we have now 3 minutes, so if you want to back up to the slides with your questions, and I'll open it up again for any of the scholars who would like to make a comment. And I see that Lynn would like to make a comment, so we'll start with Lynn while I look to see if any of the other scholars. So, Suzanne, can you unmute Lynn's line?
I might be unmuted. I don't know. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Sure.
Great. I think, again, to the scholars, I want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today as your first webinar. I'm still down in D.C. at the different meetings that Bob and I were both at. And, Bob, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I look forward to being able want to be able to invite you to one of our face-to-face sessions so that, you know, the scholars can go up and say, oh, I recognize your photo from the webinar.
Oh, I like that.
So, thank you. The website that Bob was referring to is the Future of Nursing, all one word, .org. And I would want to just encourage everyone to take a moment and to, you know, not at this moment right now, but to, you know, this weekend or pretty soon if you haven't already been on it, but to go on to thefutureofnursing.org. And I think it's going to open up rich resources for you both to the report as well as to the action items and the implementation plan that are beginning to develop around the recommendations that came from the IOM report that now is really just the beginning of us beginning to digest and understand the opportunities that exist there. And I think it's something that we're going to want everyone to be a part of. And I also wanted to take the moment to thank Nicholas, as everyone should have received, if not, it was our intent to have gotten you a message, was to be able to publicly thank Nicholas that he's moving on to different pastures, and we are very appreciative of everything that you have done, and this is part of your legacy. And so we wish you all the best. And for those on a, you know, kind of the housekeeping side of that, I want to make sure that you know that to feel free to reach out to myself or Dr. Susan Bakewell-Sachs through the program office for any questions that you all might have, so just to make sure that that transition is seamless. And so that was sort of my housekeeping details. I want to thank both Nicholas and Bob, and of course Diane for your continued work on this collaborative learning community. It's very important. So thank you.
Okay, well, it sounds like a good place to wrap up. And those of you that are coming to the 3 o'clock session, and I urge you all to do that, we need to log out of this and then re-log back into the next session. So one more time, thanks, Bob. This was
thank you, Diane. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody. And those of you that are coming back at 3. Bye-bye.